So good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are today. Thank you so much for having me. Just a bit of a side note, Professor Donna Pendergast was actually intending on presenting for us today for our team. However, she is overseas and she cannot get her internet to work. So this is me here today. My name is Sarah McManus and I'm zooming in from Mackay in central North Queensland in Australia. And welcome to our presentation, Impacts on Feelings of Effectiveness and Self-Efficacy in Field and Out-of-Field Home Economics Teachers' Perceptions and Lived Experiences. So this study was actually, there was a group of us, it was a cross-institutional study between Griffith University, UNE and CQ University, and it was led by Professor Donna Pendergast, myself, Sarah McManus, the wonderful Anna Plessis, and also Dr. Deagon from CQU. So just as a bit of a side note, further information regarding our study can be located in our publication. I've got that listed there. Obviously, it's a brief overview today, and the publication is investigating the perceptions of self-efficacy of in-field and out-of-field home economics teachers, and we published that in the Family and Consumer Sciences Research Journal because that's our target audience. So firstly, I'm going to address out-of-field teaching as a challenge for effective home economics pedagogical content knowledge. And then I'm going to very briefly go over the study methodology. And then I'm going to discuss the negative impacts of out-of-field teaching on teaching efficacy and self-efficacy, and also present some recommendations for mitigating these impacts that we actually found through our study. So, as we know, out-of-field teaching occurs when qualified teachers are assigned to teach subjects or even year levels for which they lack suitable qualifications and expertise. So, this practice is actually very common in home economics subjects. So to give you a bit more information there, I noticed the previous presentation spoke about technology. So in Australia, it is called design and technology, and also in other countries, it might be known as family and consumer sciences, family sciences, consumer sciences, so forth across the globe. So yeah, it's very common out-of-field teaching in home economics because of the global teacher shortage. But there's also, as a bit of a side note, some historical tensions surrounding the value of the learning area. And many schools and curriculum areas or curriculum developers undervalue it because they don't understand its high importance, and especially in light of contemporary health, environmental, and sustainability challenges. So what can actually happen with this subject, particularly in Australia, and we have found this around the world as well, is that often out-of-field teachers are allocated to teach it as a gap filler because of either teacher shortages, or they need to fill a gap in their own timetable, or they need to fill up their own timetable. So there's just some reasons why we get this commonly in technologies or home economics. And it's very well noted, we all know that this phenomenon of out-of-field teaching can negatively affect teacher identity. It can also negatively impact retention, satisfaction in work, and also self-efficacy. And that is that the teacher's belief in their capabilities to performing their teacher tasks effectively. So, low self-efficacy among out-of-field teachers is exacerbated by limited pedagogical content knowledge. And this combines the understanding of content and also the methods to teach a subject effectively. And then this can in turn impact teacher identity, retention, and job satisfaction, like I just mentioned. So, when brought together, these challenges can create a very difficult educational environment, which, as we know, can negatively impact our student learning outcomes. And as you'll find out very soon, especially in home economics, student safety. And also, yeah, negatively impacting the learning outcomes because teachers don't always embody a deep knowledge of the subject area, which can actually put students at risk in this particular subject as well. So our research team applied this knowledge to home economics education to develop the aim of this study, which was to compare Australian in-field and out-of-field home economics Australian teachers' beliefs on teaching effectiveness and student learning of out-of-field teaching. So just very briefly to go over the methodology, we'll spend more time on the results. The study methodology commenced with a systematic quantitative literature review, which we have published as well. And this was to build an evidence-based survey, which was ethics approved, pilot tested, and then adjusted accordingly. And the study participants included those who identified as Australian home economics teachers. And we recruited our participants through an online snowball design. And the survey was actually completed through Qualtrics in March 2022. So following data collection, a mixed method study employing statistics and thematic analysis was conducted, just using that particular Australian data slice that we're going to report on today. And we did some analysis using SPSS and Excel and Lexamancer. And then we integrated all of this data together to answer the research question, as you would expect from a mixed method study. So our demographics, our Australian demographic was 194 respondents, and they were predominantly bachelor degree qualified females employed in permanent ongoing teaching positions. And an important note here is that we know that females in teaching in general are quite dominant, particularly in Australia, but in home economics across the globe, we're looking at around about 95% female demographic. So what we actually achieved here is very, I guess, relevant across the globe. The majority were in-field teachers that we had responding to the survey, and they were mostly teaching home economic subjects, and 73% of these teachers were aged 40 years or more. So experienced home economics teachers formed the majority of our respondents, and this was with 63% teaching the subject for 11 years or more. So we have a lot of experience there. And out-of-field teachers comprise 17% of our respondents. So that's important to note that, yes, we had quite a lower percentage of out-of-field teachers than what we actually did with our in-field teachers. So moving into a bit of a statistical snapshot, just to give a brief overview here. So the statistical analysis provided a really interesting insight into respondent perceptions, and these perceptions varied greatly between in-field and out-of-field home economics teachers. So regarding teaching effectiveness, our in-field teachers believed that they were more effective at teaching home economics than their out-of-field counterparts, whereas out-of-field teachers did not agree to the same extent that in-field teachers were more effective. We also had in-field teachers disagree that out-of-field teacher home economics assessment practice were equivalent to an in-field teacher. And you can guess what's going to come next. Out-of-field teachers believed that their assessments captured the home economics requirements. So we've got a big disparity between perceptions here. And this same disparity was also identified with perceptions of student performance, with in-field teachers believing that students perform better when taught by in-field teachers. And then out-of-field teachers reported that they believe students perform as well when taught by out-of-field teachers. So we've got complete disagreement between the two groups here. Then when considering self-efficacy, teaching competence, confidence, and sense of belonging were greater when teaching in-field, with in-field teachers feeling more confident and competent than out-of-field teachers when teaching home economics. So this was really interesting here, that we've got complete disbelief through all the other points that I've just discussed, where our in-field teachers believe they're more effective, out-of-field teachers believe they can, I guess, match that level. But then when we ask them to rate their confidence and competence, so therefore self-efficacy, out-of-field teachers did actually rate themselves lower. So that's quite an interesting disparity in the results there as well. So respondents were also asked to provide their opinions regarding the effectiveness of out-of-field home economics teachers. And we put this data through Lexamancer, which is a thematic modeling sort of software. And what Lexamancer showed us was that the most discussed team, which you would assume is teachers, and this embedded responses indicating that teachers feel that their efficacy is impacted when teaching out of field, as they feel overwhelmed and low in confidence and experience. And then in-field respondents also indicated that they believe that students receive the best education from in-field teachers as they're more effective, and that It is also more time consuming to resource and develop out of field teachers to support them to be more effective. And that was noted as being quite exhausting for some in-field teachers, was just having to provide that constant support to their out of field counterparts. And then we have the home economics experience, passion, and support theme. This indicated that respondents believe that teachers with personal experience in home economics context, so people that I guess maybe even in their personal lives, involve themselves in textiles, fashion, and even food, that they're much more effective teachers. So where they have that personal interest. And it was also indicated that out of field teachers must be supported to enhance teaching efficacy, because even though where teachers tend to be better, even if they are out of field, if they do have a passion or personal experience in these areas, they still need to have the support to transfer this passion into actual practice in a classroom. So respondents also indicated that practical home economic skills alongside knowing how to teach them through demonstration are critical to effective teaching, which out-of-field teachers may not possess. And as a bit of a side note here, those practical skills and being able to demonstrate these skills to students is a 100% critical essential skill for all technologies and home economics teachers. And also safety skills were also noted to be critical to managing workplace health and safety risks in your practical classrooms, which in-field teachers reported were limited in out-of-field teachers. And this could actually place students and staff at risk of injury during practical lessons. And as a bit of a side note here as well, to give some context to this, when we did our international study, we had reports of teachers cutting fingers off themselves, students being injured. Like, there are actual reported negative impacts that can happen. So this is not just a theme or a theory. We actually have had reports of this happening. And a final note here, in-field respondents were also concerned that out-of-field teachers don't have deep knowledge of home economics, which impacts their efficacy. However, respondents also noted that a depth of home economics knowledge can be developed by out-of-field teachers if they opt to educate themselves. So in-field teachers weren't just saying, no, they're out of field, they're not going to be as good at teaching as us, they can't do this. They were actually saying, well, hang on a minute, if professional development is there, if they can work on self-education, they actually do have the capacity to bring their pedagogical content knowledge up to the level of an in-field teacher. So potential implications, there's quite a few. So our results did show a disparity in teaching efficacy beliefs between our in-field and out-of-field teachers. I think that's the key point here. We had complete differences there. And out-of-field teaching also negatively impacts teacher well-being and their pedagogical content knowledge of home economics, practical and safety skills. And this has so many implications, including increased stress, frustration, and risk of injury in practical classrooms. So to give you some more context to this risk of injury, practical home economics lessons can involve in Australia, up to 28 students using knives and really hot cooktops and ovens while washing dishes that can leave water on the floor. That's a major slip hazard. At the same time, you've got the noise of pots and pans and then general student chit chatter, which can be overwhelming and overstimulating. And then this can span across 15 cooking stations. You can have students that require one-on-one teachers' aid assistance because they're inclusion students. Then they've got the pressure of time limits of a class time. So you've got to make sure students finish their cooking prac in a specific time frame while ensuring the kitchen is spotless at the end. So this is a lot on an out-of-field teacher. And therefore, not having the pedagogical content knowledge required to manage this practical classroom can end in disaster, particularly injury, which is certainly something we don't want. And then on top of this, for students, it can lead to superficial learning experiences, reduce subject enjoyment and engagement in the subject as well. And then for the subject itself, equipment can be damaged. Students may not enjoy themselves, so they may not study the elective further in coming terms or semesters. And then when it becomes all too hard for the school, the subject is quite simply no longer offered. And we've found that to be reported globally, unfortunately. So, what do we do? To mitigate these impacts, we do actually highly recommend providing educational opportunities for out of field teachers. So, obviously, professional development, upskilling courses, dedicated support through resources, and also mentoring by experienced teachers as well. Safety training is critical. So, for examples here, kitchen and textiles room inductions. I know I've given you examples of food today, but working in textiles rooms can be just as dangerous if not trained well. And also, some of our respondents recommended strategic hiring practices as well. So, looking at if out of field teaching is essential in the school due to shortages, is there someone who has actually worked in kitchens before or does have an interest in textiles that does actually have these personal skills that they can bring to the classroom? So being strategic about who you're using out of field. And then also, it's really important to build a positive teaching culture to support our out of field teachers. That was a big point that we've made as well, because if the infield teachers are actually coming down on their out of field counterparts, not providing them with support, and basically being negative towards them and not being there for them, that can create a further divide between your teaching team members, and that can then again impact our future efficacy of our out of field teachers. So, some concluding thoughts here. Our study developed a global language to understand out of field teaching specifically to home economics and also its consequences, which I'm sure you'll agree with me can be quite serious. And what we would say, and we have actually said to our economics community, is that we do actually have some strategies to mitigate the identified implications. And this is going to be really important to implement so that we can shape the future of home economics education policy. Thank you.